Do you have a suggestion for a Rockstar Impact Podcast guest? Go to impactpodcast.com and just click Be a Guest to recommend someone today. This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by ERI. ERI has a mission to protect people, the planet, and your privacy, and is the largest fully integrated IT and electronics asset disposition provider and cybersecurity-focused hardware destruction company in the United States, and maybe even the world. For more information on how ERI can help your business properly dispose of outdated electronic hardware devices, please visit eridirect.com. This episode of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by Closed Loop Partners. Closed Loop Partners is a leading circular economy investor in the United States with an extensive network of Fortune 500 corporate investors, family offices, institutional investors, industry experts, and impact partners. Closed Loop's platform spans the arc of capital from venture capital to private equity, bridging gaps and fostering synergies to scale the circular economy. To find Closed Loop Partners, please go to www.closedlooppartners.com. Welcome to another edition of the Impact Podcast. I'm John Grigoryan, and I'm very honored and excited to have with me my longtime friend, Erik Grigoryan's with us. He's the CEO and founder of the Environment Group. Welcome to the Impact Podcast, Erik.
Thank you very much, and I'm very excited to be here to talk with you again. We talked a lot about the environment and climate previously, so I'm honored to be here and to talk with you.
You know, Erik, you have a fascinating and wonderful background. I got time, I was honored and, just so excited to be with you when I was in Armenia last time. And you took time out of your incredibly busy schedule to show me all around our beautiful homeland. And talk a little bit about growing up in Armenia and how you fell in love with the environment and got into the kind of work and this wonderful journey that you're on.
So I remember all my career was connected with the environment. So I finished, my education was with the environment. Of course, it was environment economics. So in that time, I was in economics and in environment, but year by year, I become more close to environment and less maybe in economy. But I always say that it's connected, it's harmonized. So it's one of the biggest mistakes for last decades, I will say, when economy and the environment was, recognized as an enemies, but they are working together. So you should consider it together. So my education, that I started my journey from the government. I was an intern. Then, I spent the years in an Armenian government, a leading specialist, senior specialist, head of division. So and then I moved to IFIs. I worked for UNDP. I worked for World Bank and for some other institutions as well. Then I returned back. I was an advisor to Prime Minister for environment, climate, and related activities. Then I was a first deputy minister, then minister for a few years. And a few years ago, I left. And for last few years, 4 years actually, I'm with an Environment Group, the company that I founded, and I'm working, very excited what we are doing, because we become a company that's not working only in our country or in a region, but in a global scale. So we have activities in different places.
Draw a little bit of parallel here. You were basically, the Minister of the Environment of Armenia is like the head of the EPA in the United States and the head of the EPA of any other wonderful nation around the world. Talk a little bit about public-private. You have this wonderful organization called the Environment Group, and for people who want to find Erik and his colleagues, they can go to environment.am, environment.am. But from 2018 to 2020, you were the Minister of the Environment. You were the number one person in Armenia. Talk a little bit about effectuating change on the public side and then as a public sector official, and then effectuating change and for the better in the private side. How do they compare, and which hat do you like to wear more?
Fortunately, when I took this position, I was very much aware of the problems because I spent many, many years. It's coming from down. I started as an intern. So many, many problems related to water, mining, tailings, waste management, so whatever, there are so many questions. I knew about this problem, not only the problems, but persons who were involved. It was the time that was some corruption mechanism working there. Why these specific legal acts were developed to support this illegal logging, for example, or overuse of water resources. And fortunately, I came a time that I took a lot of reforms. So in my LinkedIn page, actually, it's an article about 111 reforms that we did. It's for water, waste, electric vehicles, so a lot of reforms. I would like just to mention one or two. For example, we made changes in legislation and made too cheap actually to import electric cars to support electric mobility. So we waived the VAT, we waived the custom duties, and importing electric cars to Armenia become a very, very beneficial, just not because these people are, environmentally people, but it was economically too efficient to import. And Armenia become a leader, actually. Now you will go outside of the city, you will see so much electric cars that you will not see any country in this region. So it's bringing a lot of electric mobility, increased our energy security because we don't have any oil, gas, or some kind of resources, but we have some renewables here. So it's one of the reforms. I will say it was a really very good time to be able to do these reforms. And not only, again, an electric, it was some reforms on a plastic, on a waste, on a water management. But again, being an environmental economist, I always saw this dilemma between economic and environment, because it was some understanding that if you want to care about the environment, you should be enough rich. And poor countries can't consider environment problems before having some, the level of income. But this was one of, again, the biggest mistakes from the decades. You can see, I mean, a lot of environment-friendly solutions are coming from private sector. The private sector is spending a lot of resources and R&D to find solutions that are economically efficient, but at the same time environmentally friendly. Just LED lamps, it's a very good sample. So when you are doing any kind of renovation, you are not thinking to buy an LED lamp because you are an environment guy. But it's economic efficient. So this is, it was an underestimation of the role of private companies before, but now they become more and more important, especially when we are talking about climate change and carbon, because the most of the biggest countries in the world, biggest companies in the world, they voluntarily pledge to become a carbon zero. I mean, they are taking a lot of steps, they are spending a lot of resources. And if you will compare in the ground, not by a paper, but in the ground, you will see that these private companies actually doing much more than some governments or some programs that we know, because, the private are more flexible. And yes, if you will see now the role of the private companies, it's increasing and increasing, and they are much more efficient actually when considering how much money was spent for some specific actions. It's better to use a private companies. It will be, for example, reforestation project of any other project.
Right. What year did you start the environment group?
I tried actually I will say the capital that I gained during my 20 years of working in a government, working for IFIs, for UN institutions, my networks, my ties, my everything that I gained. I try to bring to this company, and if you will go to the website, you will see that we have an experts from all over the world. I mean, from Germany, from Slovakia, from South America. So
Right.
all these people are the experts and colleagues and friends that I worked before, and we try to bring our knowledge. There are different topics that we are working. For example, now we are developing deposit refund system for Armenia. This is this bottling when you are paying some small amount of money for plastic bottle, then returning back, and
Right.
then you are getting. Actually, we started another program for electronic waste. Actually, we
Oh,
developed. Yes, we developed a proposal for Green Climate Fund. It was approved and it will start, especially how to make a basement for recycling of solar panels and recycling of electric car batteries. So it's quite different directions that we are working, developing a legal acts for secondary water use. But it's one topic that we are very much involved is that for climate swap. This is something that we worked for many years, and it was one of my PhD topics back to 20 years.
what is it? What does debt for climate swap actually mean?
Oof. I will need just to come with a very small historical background because um, it was a mechanism called debt for nature swap, and
Oh,
it was developed in the 80s. It was a mechanism when the countries, mainly from South America, that has a problem with serving of debt, they were able, during restructuring of their debt, some part of the money to spend for biodiversity, for environment. The philosophy behind this mechanism was that we have one globe, one earth, and when we don't have enough money for developing countries to invest on environment, then they need to, overuse resources, for example, cut more forests to sell it and to serve their debt. And if you will do some kind of swap, then they will be able to keep these natural resources. But all mechanisms that were developed starting from 80s, they had a one common like a philosophy that was a result of debt restructuring. So problem with serving of foreign debt. The debt for climate swap, actually, the mechanism that we developed, because it was developed by us, and 5 years ago, Armenia presented this mechanism in a General Assembly during the climate summit invited by Antonio Guterres. We proposed to bring also obligations of creditor countries to this mechanism. To be clear, from one side, developing countries need to pay some debt and to serve their debt to the developed countries, the creditor countries. But from other side, creditor countries has a common obligation under climate processes, Paris Agreement, and Climate Convention to support developing countries up to $100 billion annually for climate adaptation and mitigation measures.
okay.
So what we are proposing, I will bring an example on an Armenian case, but we are doing the same for other countries, so I can explain there. For example, we have a debt to France, $140 million.
Okay.
And France has his own obligation to support developing countries on climate that it's annually $2-3 billion. So what we are proposing them, let's swap this money and spend internally on Armenian climate adaptation projects or mitigation. particularly in this case, we decided to spend some money on drinking water renovation system. Because of climate change, we have less and less water because of it, the temperature increase, because of reduction of precipitation. So we need to invest more because it's not enough water for this.
Wow.
And then we will record and report to Climate Convention that this $140 million was provided by France, and France actually will report that this $140 million was, transferred to Armenia. But we added also some other components. For example, we have Veolia working in Armenia, that it's a French company, that it's operator of water system. And we will do this system, then the swap through the Veolia company. So they will have some, we added some corporate interests here. There are some other components, you are using a different methods to argue that it's a win-win also for creditor country. So generally, the idea is just a platform. It's a platform when two countries working together, negotiating, and bilaterally happy to swap some money, and instead of paying as a foreign debt to creditor, to spend internally on a climate adaptation and mitigation measures in country, but at the same time assuring that both countries will report that this money was a climate finance, that was obligation also for creditor country.
And then who gets to report on the success of the actual mitigation that you did? So, for instance, with Armenia, you're creating more water opportunities. Is Armenia reporting on that, or is France, or do both get the opportunity? Both.
It's all mechanisms are set under UNFCCC Convention. It's United Nations Framework Convention of Climate Change. And countries like they have biannual reports reporting what was done, what is the situation, how much money was provided, how much was received. So all this reporting are there. So this is a very important point, because this is actually the difference between debt for nature and debt for climate that we are proposing. Because debt for nature from 80s, it was a result of a restructuring of debt. Debt for climate swap is an alternative, innovative platform actually for two countries that working together and deciding how to spend actually the money for adaptation, because everyone knows if you are not spending $1 now for adaptation, then after 5-10 years you will spend 10 times more. So it's very important to have this concrete, and this money is there. I mean, this is in our budget. It's allocated to be spent to, serve a debt. But once we decided and we agreed with the France that let's do this work together, we can immediately allocate it and allocate by local currency. That is also one of the benefits of this swap. Instead of hard currency, to spend the local currency and to start to do the work immediately. I talked about the water project, but same now we are discussing with Germany on a reforestation project.
So let's go back to the water project. So now you do this with France and Armenia, and Veolia is Veolia is the private company, or it's a publicly traded company, yes, as you and I both know. So it's really a wonderful bilateral public, but then also private partnership between a corporation and two great countries, France and Armenia. And everybody wins. France wins, Armenia wins, the people of Armenia win, Veolia wins, it's more business for them, and now the water situation in Armenia gets better.
Definitely. And
so there's winning all around. There's winning all around.
It's a win-win.
And you've taken what my understanding from what you've just explained, Erik, is that you've taken the debt for nature platform from the 80s, and it's more evolved. It's more evolved for the times that we live in, that meets the world where it's at now, where it's all trying to, like you said, we're trying to decarbonize the planet as fast as we can. So this goes towards the decarbonization and the improvement of the countries that are benefiting from this debt for climate swap. So it's a win. The planet wins, the people win, the two countries win, and then also the company that's executing the work also gets a win as well and continues to do their good and important work.
I mean, I don't need to add. You
That's
already
wonderful.
explained what it, but it's what is actually important, and this is a very small part that I would like to explain when you are negotiating on debt for climate.
Yeah.
And it's debt for nature swap. You're already facing a problem with your debt. Well, that was with Argentina, some other countries previously. And when you are talking with your creditors, it may be some kind of goodwill, or they will press with their conditions because you are debitor, you have a problem, and there are some activities that you should take. When we are talking on debt for climate swap, actually this is a win-win. I mean, this is also very good for creditor because they have their own obligation to fulfill. But
Right.
there are some funds available, but they are so slow. It's taking 3 years, 4 years to prepare a proposal. Then you don't have enough resources to work in a country. So it's a really complicated situation. When we are talking about this 100 billion pledge that was under a Paris Agreement that developed countries should provide, it was failed. It's clear globally, it was failed. So you always will see developing countries coming and saying, most of this money are credits, and we are already over debt, so we can take additional credits there. And you will see, and from other side, from developed countries, from creditor countries, they will say there is no, enough qualified projects that we may invest in this project. So then consider this mechanism as an alternative innovative tool. Because we were talking about Armenia and France, but imagine the same may happen between Nigeria and Germany, between Benin and New Zealand, between any country. Because I told we started to work because I'm acting on behalf of my country. I'm a negotiator on that for climate swap. But we help the Pacific small islands, islands, 14 small islands, especially hard after COVID, because most of the incomes were coming from tourism. So they were hit by different aspects. So COVID, reducing of the incomes, and then they are the most vulnerable countries on climate change. So where to find money? But then you may come with this, and it's not only like water or reforestation, it may be solar projects. I mean, the solar may be there. So any project that may help developing countries to receive some resources for climate adaptation. Why I am, returning to adaptation, because I believe that for mitigation, especially under Article 6 of this ITMOs, you may apply for the bigger companies to go to Apple, to Google, and say, this is the reforestation area, let's do some project, or to make a certified project and to try to sell it. But for adaptation is a little bit problematic to find resources.
For our listeners and viewers who've just joined us, we've got Erik Grigoryan with us. He's the CEO and founder of the Environment Group. You can find Erik and his esteemed colleagues at environment.am. Environment.am. Erik, now explain to me, before we go into some of the other great projects you've worked on and are currently working on, explain to me environment.am and your role in the debt for climate swap. Are you negotiating the amount between the two countries? Are you then making sure that amount is given? And then are you then choosing the project that needs to get done? Or are you doing that in combination with the host or the creditor and the creditee country? How are you choosing water? Who chooses Veolia, and who gets the two countries to sit down and make this kind of deal? Is that all go through the Environment Group?
Yes, actually, I started with an Armenian case because I was in a cabinet, so I was a minister to initiate this process. But when I left, and our government decided that I need to help with the negotiation process. So I was appointed to be a negotiator on behalf of Armenia with creditor countries, with the UNFCCC, with an IFIs and institutions. So actually, it's a quite long, the steps when you're deciding to work and then to deciding with which country to work, because this mechanism mainly working on bilateral public debt. It's an easy one, because if you need to go to the private debt, it's a much more complicated. You should be, you can't make more noise on this because it's a debt negotiations, and every, non correct word will be too sensitive for your private credit also. So,
Right.
I mean, a lot of works that you are doing, you don't need to do. I mean, you can, even if you want to come and invite all journalists and say we did see, we have such kind of achievement, you can do it. So you are
Right.
negotiating. Yeah. Why specifically projects or water or reforestation? We are looking at priorities of creditor countries. So we know that France is much more interested on water. Germany is much more interested on forest and biodiversity. And
Ah,
we are trying to find the place actually, and going with our arguments why it's good for them. Because with Germany, we're saying, you have such a beautiful experience for reforestation and afforestation. Within 50, 60 years, you were able to do such a large reforestation in Germany. And if we will not pay a foreign debt, but transfer this for reforestation in Armenia, then we will involve the German companies to come and to work on this project. And you will have also the private companies here. And, there are some more, I mean, you are using whatever you can use. Do you know that we have a large diaspora in France? So when it's before election, so you are also using, that there are so many components that you will need to
so
use.
Erik, let's be honest. Yeah, listen, I know you many years now. You're a brilliant man. So this goes way beyond dollars and cents. This also goes to the heart and soul of understanding what's important to you, as you just said, the creditor countries, and making sure you fulfill what's really the mission and the DNA of that creditor country. As you said, Germany, reforestation. Not only do we have a large diaspora in France, but they care about water. So the dollars and cents is one part of the negotiation, but the emotional part and the good and the people skills and understanding what's important to who is absolutely unbelievably important in these kind of negotiations.
Yes, and it's also sometimes you may have a trouble when somebody from your government will use any, non-correct word. It may be one word, because
Wow.
we had some kind of problems when some of, the officials were asking the creditor country, when you are going to do our debt forgiveness, and everything
Oh,
was stopped because, I mean, there are so many francophone countries with much lower GDP per capita, and if you are talking about debt forgiveness or something like this, so it will not happen.
so this
It's
really
the
is
process, yeah.
Oh, so this is dollars and cents, emotional intelligence, but also at the end of the day, you get to lean on your 20 years of government experience. This is diplomacy at its finest. You have to choose every word with every word has gravitas, and every word that you choose in discussing it, announcing it, executing it is very, very important.
Yes, and because I mean our activity, the environment group activity on debt for climate swap,
Yeah.
we were hired by UN actually to help also Sri Lankan government.
Wow.
So for the last 1.5 years, I'm directly working with Sri Lankan government, and after 10 days I will fly also again Colombo, that I'm flying very often.
Explain that. You've shown this success in Armenia. Now, how many other countries are you doing this with? That's the interesting part.
So we did a feasibility study for Pacific Sea. It's for 14 countries, and making this mechanism how these small island countries may benefit with their creditors. We started to work with Sri Lanka. We have now requests from one Central Asian country. We'll work with them. They did some mistakes on negotiation process, and now we will try to help them with this.
Mend the fence. You're going to mend the fence. You're going to fix it.
But it's much more important that like 5 years ago, when we just started to use this mechanism, the word debt was even problematic to use. I mean, the debt of something, that's why we named the mechanism Innovative Climate Finance Tool without using debt. Because we were receiving the delegations coming from World Bank monthly saying, do not touch debt, whatever you want to do. But now, actually, there are 60 countries globally that are facing a problem with that. And most of them are climate vulnerable. So if not today, but definitely tomorrow, this tool will start to work. And this is an option that will help, again, win-win for creditors and debitors to implement the projects. But it's not only climate projects, it's also a very important part. When you are doing a large reforestation, it's not only about environment and climate, it's also about socio-economic part, because you are hiring a lot of local people to do this work. It's impacting positively. The same with the water project, the church project. So it's also socio-economic, a big component here. So this is very important to understand. So again, we have some initial negotiation with some Arabic countries that are facing a problem with the water and with debt. But what is interesting that IFIs like the World Bank or EBRD or IMF, they started to talk about that for climate swap. If you will go to the website, the IMF website, you will see even a policy paper developed by IMF saying that this is one of mechanisms. But just few years ago, it was unbelievable to have any kind of debt or climate swap in these institutions. So it's now important that you will give enough basement for two countries bilateral to discuss, to understand, and to start to implement. Because again, it's very important if you start climate adaptation projects now. Because when you have any problem because of climate change, and we see, every month we have new records for the temperature, for these disasters or whatever there, then your losses are much more. So we need to start to, spend money on a climate project and to try to do, the decarbonization actually, because, it's not just word, because for most of the people, these climate talks are still something, far. They are not considering that it's something important. But when you are like in agriculture or in any sector that directly connected with temperature or the water availability, then you can see already. The world is not the same as it was 10 years ago, definitely. And you need to adapt. Otherwise, you will start to lose your tourism, your agriculture, because all these sectors are vulnerable to climate change.
What is the future of debt for climate swap, or as you say, this innovative financing mechanism? Is the environment group going to be doing this? Do you feel, not only in Sri Lanka, but how many other projects do you think over the next 5 years you're going to be involved with? You're working with World Bank, you're working with the UN, obviously you're working with various countries. How is this going to only accelerate because of the success that you showed in France and Armenia?
Yes, it will be accelerated because it seems a simple tool actually. And explain, I mean, there's no big, complicated processes because when you are doing any kind of debt restructuring through Paris Club is so complicated. You need to go to talk with all other debitors that creditor has to receive any kind of agreement that will take years, 10 years, 5 years of negotiation. This is what we are trying to do, simplify a process as much as possible. Creditor happy, debitor happy, private entities are happy, they can sell something, it was reported, everyone is happy, then let's do it. And I see that, I mean, it's not a matter of one or two countries on a debt serving problems, it's 60. So if you can work with one or two to do some kind of prolongation or, to do some repayment period coming a few years later, you can do it with one or two or three countries. But with 60, you can do. And especially, we should consider that, I mean, climate change is real, and we don't need actually to find a benefit because of climate change. For example, to consider, I'm in agriculture in European Union, give us more money coming from, European, institution, commission, or we are farmers, or we are here, or we are vulnerable. It's really a problem. We need to solve it. And we see that the temperature is changing much faster than it was, proposed. I mean, we just yesterday it was the data coming from World Meteorological Organization. It's already 156, or the degree of increase is much higher that we were proposing by Paris Agreement to try to limit 1.5. And this is changing all the process. For example, if you are in agriculture and you have the temperature heat for one day, like 40 degrees, it's
Right.
okay. The plant may survive. But when you have 10 days in a row, you need to change something. And again, this tool is giving a chance to spend the real money now on adaptation measures and on mitigation, of course.
Erik, you're the CEO and founder of the Environment Group. And for our listeners and viewers, to find Erik and all of his great colleagues at the Environment Group, please go to environment.am, environment.am. What's the future hold for which direction is the Environment Group going now? Are you excited about the opportunities? Is it growing beyond your expectations? And what are you most excited about as we are now going into the middle of 2024 and all the things that are going on right now currently with regards to decarbonizing this great planet that we live on?
Actually, when we started, COVID came immediately. Then we had some tragic problems in Armenia because it was war. So it's a time that, it was not a good time for beginning. But anyway, we started to grow up, and I'm very happy with our partners. I said we are partnering with large IFIs and the UN institutions. But I see coming from developing countries, the company that is coming from developing countries, and knowing the real ground problems in developing countries, because in many cases, it's not a problem with the finance, because a lot of support money is flowing to developing countries. But when you don't have enough knowledge and experience, you don't know what to do, how to spend it, and then your results it's lower than it's expected. So I see our role actually to support developing economies to be much more prepared on any kind of, for example, negotiation. So we are negotiating on behalf of debitor countries in any case, not on behalf of creditor countries, to assure that they will have a more solid arguments, because you need to understand. I mean, if you know that your creditor has his own obligation and they can't actually fulfill it because of some problems, you can go and negotiate on this scale. Otherwise, you are just going and asking for money as, the goodwill or a poor relative. It's not that good to use such kind of wording, but yeah, you need to understand your strong parts also. And it's a common, actually, obligation of all nations on a climate and the environment. So I see our role, actually. I'm very happy that we started to work not only in my country, but also in some other countries, helping mainly the governments, but we are very open to help the companies, industries on the carbon-related activities. We developed the carbon accounting soft, actually, that will help the companies to account their carbon footprint. So it's very wide. So the depository fund, the plastic, the water, waste, but the climate and the carbon-related activities are primary expertise.
So you created software to track people's Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions?
It's not for the people, but it's for companies.
Companies, right.
Because the larger companies, they don't want to know how to say, give more information on companies outside to calculate their footprints, because if you calculate carbon footprint, you know a lot about companies, so they are much more interested on carbon accounting soft. So they will just input the data, will receive a result, and then to disclose this, but not give the very detailed information, because it's very much connected with the businesses. So we worked with the German company, software company, to develop this soft, and again trying to sell it mainly in the Arabic countries. But yes, those are the issues, and plus we are also now looking for specific reforestation projects to be certified and to be sold in a international market as an ITMO.
And the more software that you've created helps these companies be more transparent, where historically there was opaque information and no one was sharing anything. This is to help get more information out there.
Yes, and actually there are, especially in our region, there are a lot of obligations coming. For example, if you are exporting something to European Union, there are some certain type of products. It's even regulation by the European Union called Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. It says that you need to provide a carbon accounting. Then if you are emitting more than the local European companies, you need to pay per every ton of CO2. According to European Union prices, that it's very expensive, like 100 euro per ton. So yeah, it's a lot of mechanisms. So you need to, even if you don't want to do this carbon accounting, but it's already here. Carbon accounting will become a part of your accounting.
Let's switch topics for a second, Erik. How is our wonderful and beautiful homeland country, Armenia, doing with regards to decarbonization? Are you happy with the progress there? You talked a little bit at the top of the show about the amount of amazing EV cars that are now going throughout Armenia. Are we doing a good job with keeping up with our obligations to decarbonize Armenia?
Yes, this was one of the reforms that we initiated to waive any kind of taxes and custom duties for electric mobility.
Yeah.
And it was just booming in Armenia. So it's the highest level of the electric car use in the region. And it's very common. So I am personally driving the electric car and very happy with this one. But specifically in this region, it's really very booming on electric mobility. But years ago, we announced that we are going to double our forest cover of Armenia. And we were fortunate to start in that time because we were able to request some international support to do forest landscape restoration mapping of Armenia. So we have now the places that are available for reforestation and afforestation. And this is a large project. Also, there are some other processes going, like electrification of a transport, like Yerevan municipality just announced that the next 250 buses will be electric one. So we are still keeping in this below our commitment, because by national determined contribution of Armenia, we will have 40% less than we had in 1990. We are still there, but because economy is growing very fast, so the emission is still growing. But when we are comparing with the GDP increase and the CO2 is decoupling. So we are using less and less electricity, so CO2 emission, because renewables are growing. So we have the very large. So now we have more solar than any other sources. Yes, the solar is booming really in Armenia because it was a very good condition for private companies to invest. So we just started a 200 megawatt project in Armenia that will be built by Emirati company, Masdar. It's the biggest renewable company in probably they are now the biggest in the world. I don't know. So yes, so those are the booming. And again, it's very important to understand that economically it's more efficient to be an environment friendly. Right. Because always your environment and climate arguments, I mean, it's weaker than economic, financial, and social argument. But once you can combine them and say that it's economically efficient, but it's environmentally friendly, then it's starting to run, and you don't need any additional measures to support. Like with an electric car. So no one is giving any kind of additional. So people are just buying because it's economically efficient.
Because it just makes good sense.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, Erik, you are always welcome on the Impact Podcast. I just get so jazzed when you talk about all the new things that you're working on and making the world a better place. For our listeners and viewers, to find Erik Grigoryan and his colleagues at the Environment Group and all the great work they're doing, please go environment.am. Go to environment.am. Erik Grigoryan, you're not only a great friend, but you are just an inspiration to me every time I'm with you, every time I listen to you. And I'm just so grateful, not only for the time you took tonight, and it's nighttime in Armenia when we're taping this, it's daytime here in Fresno, California, but I'm not only grateful for the time you took to spend with us today on the Impact Podcast, but I'm much more grateful for always knowing that you make the world a better place.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. I learned a lot from you, actually. Why Armenia now started this electronic recycling, actually, it's because of you. Why we started to develop the basement, the legal acts, or whatever, is because of you. So we are both in the environment, and I believe that whatever we are doing in this sector, it's not for today or tomorrow, but it's for our generation, and this is the right work to do, actually.
Thank you again, Erik. Please come back on the show. Please continue to share the great journey that you're on and the important journey that you're on and the journey that the Environment Group's on, because like I said, you and your colleagues on a regular basis make the world a better place.
Thank you. All the best.
This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by Engage. Engage is a digital booking platform revolutionizing the talent booking industry. With thousands of athletes, celebrities, entrepreneurs, and business leaders, Engage is the go-to spot for booking talent, for speeches, custom experiences, live streams, and much more. For more information on Engage or to book talent today, visit letsengage.com. This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by ERI. ERI has a mission to protect people, the planet, and your privacy, and is the largest fully integrated IT and electronics asset disposition provider and cybersecurity-focused hardware destruction company in the United States and maybe even the world. For more information on how ERI can help your business properly dispose of outdated electronic hardware devices, please visit eridirect.com.